Okay.
Because it
So
is a conversation that I've been having with a lot of white people.
you've been having lots of conversations, and we've talked
Mhm.
about a lot of white people, and not just white people, want to be allies to people of color,
Mhm.
especially in view of everything that's going on and how changes are being made. A lot of people are uncomfortable about it. Statues are coming down.
Mhm.
They're upgrading and updating Aunt Jemima. There's a lot of stuff going on that's making people feel nervous for whatever reason. So you had said that one thing that white men could do is play a pivotal role
Mhm.
in making people open their eyes and ears and hearts when it comes to people of color and diversity and more diversity in recruitment in the workplace. What are some
Mhm.
tips you would give to white men about the role they can play and the power they have?
Well, so like I said, research shows that white men are the only group that can push for diversity and equity and inclusion and not be suffer professional retributions, right? If you're a white woman or a person of color and you're pushing for equity, even though they won't say it outrightly, they will find ways to punish you professionally. White men don't have that. So I'm like, play on your privilege. Also, when white men speak, there's not the prove it again bias that women have. Like when I speak, I have to have all this research in front of the people and be ultra prepared because people are going to grill me and make me prove it again. Whereas if I work, and presenting with the white man, he can just say, "Oh well," da, 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 and they're like, "Oh, okay," so he doesn't have the prove it again bias too. So white men can use, if they say they're woke finally, if they say they're down, if they say they see, if they say they're going to fight all this Facebook warrior stuff I'm seeing online, then do it, right? I do it. And so there's different ways that white men can do that if they want to push for policy change. One policy change that I'm thinking about in HR, in interviewing practices to open the door, is to put in a policy that you cannot interview someone with more than half your staff being white cisgender, right? You have to have half your panel, right? Your interviewing panel can only be 50% white cisgender, and the other half have to be a combination of people of color and LGBTQ. Because that opens, like if you are a Black woman coming in and there's 4 people there and you see that there's 2 people of color, you're going to automatically feel like you can bring a little bit more of your authentic self to the interview. And it doesn't even have to be a full 50%, but that's a good starting point to say no more than half your staff can be white cisgendered. And then that way it also it's kind of like a check and balance where the people of color are going to see something or check the way people on their biases and ensure that the interview is a little bit more fair. Also, one thing that I want to push HR is doing is keeping track of hiring practices, keeping track of who's inviting people of color or LGBTQ to interview, who's hiring them, and then keeping track of the attrition rate. And then that way you can zero in. One thing, if people know that you're paying attention to the hiring practices, they start paying attention to their own hiring practices, right? Because nobody wants to appear racist. So they're like, oh, wait, I'm not looking at people. So it's kind of checking themselves, even though it's an outward motivation, it's still the same impact, right? Inviting more people of color to interview. And then who's hiring? Like if you have someone that is interviewing a lot of people of color but only hiring white people, then you can drill down on what you need to work on that leader with. And then also, if there's a great attrition rate, like this director invites people of color, hires people of color, cannot retain people of color, that means that environment in that department is inhospitable to people of color, and you need to work with that leader on how you can make it a place where people of color feel comfortable and valued at working.
Well,
So that's one thing you could push.
no, I think that's great. And because I think what it speaks to is a lot of things that people just don't see. You know, like when you're talking about the
Mhm,
attrition and you're talking about people leaving, sometimes people are just looking at black and white statistics, and that doesn't tell the
mhm,
whole story. It doesn't tell how people
mhm,
feel emotionally. It
mhm,
doesn't tell if they felt like they had a voice. It doesn't tell a lot of the things that are going on maybe beneath the surface that affect a person's performance, affect even their appeal as far as wanting to work for your organization. I mean, just
mhm,
in terms of the traditional ways that we advertise jobs, where we advertise them, what's the wording, what's the ad look like? Do the ads have people of color in the ads?
mhm,
You know, is
mhm,
your website diverse? So there's all these little factors that have to come into consideration when you're trying to engage people of color. And then once you get them, that's when the work really begins.
mhm.
Because sometimes people think, well, we have, you know, 3 black women, 4 Asians, a person in a wheelchair, 2 gay people, and now we're done. And then they just forget about it. That's
Mhm.
just the front end. That's just the
Yeah.
beginning of the work.
Well, and then and that's one thing that I worked on when I worked with my teachers, is that we were working on culturally responsive instruction, but I was also pushing them relating to the cultural frame of reference. And if 90% of the people that work in this building are white middle class women, that's the culture we have. And how do we make it so that it's comfortable for teachers of color to stay? You know, and I put the work on them on that piece. And I bring up the HR piece because that's something white men can push their HR department on in a way that I can't, in a way that people of color can't. But if a white man says, hey, why don't we look at this? And this is the time, because I have brought that to school districts before, and they look, the head of HR is like, yeah, that's not going to happen, not with the unions and all of that. But this might be time for small entities for a white man to really, that's what he's going to push on, is hiring practices and breaking down the structural barriers that prevent people of color from being hired and even interviewed or staying. You know, I think that's one way a white man could really use his privilege to push anti-racist practices in making it structural, not just let's have an understanding of each other, but make some structural changes in our organizations. So that's one way I think a white man can use his privilege to push anti-racist policies.
Well, what you're saying about structure kind of reminds me of a house and the
Mhm,
foundation. You know, you can have a beautiful looking house. You've got pretty portraits on the wall, nice colors, great floors, but the foundation isn't structurally sound, the house is
mhm,
going to collapse. Doesn't matter how good it looks on the outside. So I think of that when I see organizations that they 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 don't walk the talk, they just talk. So the website
mhm,
says Black Lives Matter and we stand up against racial injustice and all this other stuff, but until you start making structural policy changes, um, people are just going to fall back into what they were doing because that's been the status quo for 20, 30 years. It's like a default. You go back to what's most familiar, and so the policies are going to force people to change. Like you were talking about, the having a certain percentage of people of color or diversity within a job interview situation. That's
mhm,
that's a policy change. It's not
mhm,
just saying, "Oh, hey, why don't you try this?" Because people can say, "Well, I don't want to do it right now. I'll do it next week."
mhm.
You know, it's like when your
Yeah,
car
you have to
finally
have the
breaks
policy
down.
change, and the
Yeah,
interview doesn't happen if you don't have the right panel,
right.
you
So let
know?
me ask you this one last question because I know we're going to be talking some more, and I appreciate you spending some time here and condensing very complicated answers to complicated problems. But one thing that comes up is like, what do you do in a meeting, or what do you do with your old Uncle Ralph, who's a racist, who
Mhm,
says stuff at Thanksgiving? It's a delicate thing to approach because on one hand, you know, someone can say something racially or culturally insensitive or offensive in a workplace, but you then have to work with that person. So what's a constructive way of maybe starting to talk to people about race and about maybe trying to look at a different perspective without it just turning into an argument?
Well, I think first, so that you're not going to war without a gun, right, or a weapon, is to do your work and understand what systemic racism is, what structuralized racialization is. Know if if you look on your conservative friends' Facebook pages, you're going to know what their talking points are. And so learn those. Like, I don't unfriend people on Facebook. First of all, they get to read all my posts. Second of all, if they post something dumb, they're going to know I'm going to be on it, right?
Hmm.
So people stop posting stupid things because they know I'm just going to cause havoc on it when I have time. There's times I just don't go on Facebook because I know that I'm going to be embroiled in something. But so you find the talking points of people who are overtly racist and people who are the All Lives Matters movement. That's covert racism right there. They think it's covert. I'm like, you're racist. That's just, but know those talking points and be able to dissect what their talking points are with real data and real truth. So that's the part you have to understand and have knowledge. So maybe right now you just are working and practicing arguments on Facebook. Like, I look at that. Practice your arguments on Facebook when you have a
Right.
time to put your thoughts together, when you can research the answers and make it thoughtful. Like, I've never gone like, you're a racist. And I'm always like, okay, well, so what about this? And I don't ask why, I ask how and what questions, because why automatically puts people on defensive, right? But just practice being calm and measured in Facebook, and coming with what are your points that you're going to be able to remember. When you're at Uncle George, if there's children there, I try to be calm and measured, but I always say something. I don't care if I blow up Christmas. So, and to me, you can't be a racist and a good person. They can't coexist. So even though Uncle George may be great to me and taught me how to drive, if he's a racist, he can't be a good person to me. You can't be a racist and be a good person. You can do nice things for the people you love. That's not a good person. So just know you might blow up Christmas, but you have to, especially if children are involved. If they're watching you, practice your Facebook arguments and just know it's probably not going to go well. At work, that's a different thing. You do have to make rent. You do have to move up professionally. And even now, like I told you, there was a situation that happened and it was with Black women were facilitating and a white man said something that I know he didn't intend to be racist, but it came across and the impact was the same. And I have been doing this for a long time and going, do I jump in? Do I be the white savior? Or do I just step back and let the Black women who are very intelligent, awesome people, leaders, because they're very skilled at it, handle this? And then knowing that Black people are tired of handling this, trying to gauge that piece, like, you're not always going to get it perfect. So the way I handled it was, I texted them, the Black women said, I'm going to talk to this person. And I had a private conversation. Because also one thing is that if you feel that you can have a private conversation and this is going to lead to change in thought and behavior, shame and publicly humiliating someone doesn't lead to that. Even though in my very core, I want to check this person.
Right.
But what's my end goal? Change in behavior, change in thought. So I also I wanted other people to know that I'm an ally. I'm in this. I'm going to have this uncomfortable conversation. I got your back. You don't have to do anything else unless you want me want to. And I also checked that they were okay with me having this conversation with this person. And I had the conversation with the person and it went well. It went well because it was a private conversation. I didn't humiliate him. And he did leave feeling absolutely horrible, right? But he got to have that horrible experience in a safe container. And even though like I'm frustrated and I'm like, I don't want to make white people comfortable anymore. I'm done with that. The reality is that people are people, and if you want to change in behavior, sometimes you're going to have to suck in your gut reactions and what you're raging, what you really want to do, and have this safe conversation, because it is moving towards a change in behavior. It is moving for a change of thought, and it was things that he hadn't thought of. So my end goal is moving towards where it is, and hopefully the impact will move towards that too. I want to give straight up answers, but like I'm saying, if you're just in this argument, or even if you're deep in it, like I don't unfriend racist people unless you're outwardly disrespectful racist, then I know you're never going to have a talk. If you're calling me out my name and telling me I'm stupid, which I'm not, I know that, I will unfriend you because that's based in something else. But
Well,
if you're like an all lives matter person, I'm going to read your stuff because I need to know what conservative that mindset is thinking. And then I use Facebook to practice those thoughts, but I take the time to be very, very measured. There's sometimes I react like, oh, hell no, you did not just say that. I'm not perfect, y'all, but and then just remember, like, publicly and humiliating. And it's hard. You don't want to be the person that speak out in front of everybody either. So there's no reasons why you can't have those conversations privately, because you don't want to have performative allyship where it's a performance, right? I need you to know I'm an ally. No, an ally is doing the day-to-day dirty, messy work, and you don't have to do it where other people see it.
I think that's a good point, because I think, like you said, people, if you're out in the public, people get defensive. Once they get defensive, they stop listening to you. The other thing you mentioned is that things take time. If somebody's 30, 40, 50 years old, it took them that long to get to who they are now in the present and their current perspective on life and their own reality. And it's not going to happen overnight. So you're not going to just have one little 1 hour diversity session and then it's all good. I think the thing you said about the last point I just want to make is the thing about kids. I think it's so critical, because kids are watching you. They know what's going on. They see what's going on the TV. And I mean, of course, you want to talk to them in an age appropriate way. I mean, I don't think you want to talk to a 2-year-old about, the history of racism. But at the same time, if you've got older kids, they turn on the TV, they ask mom, why are these people protesting? What's going on? And I've known some parents that'll say, well, never mind, change the channel. Well, if it's like drugs and sex and other things you got to talk to your kids about. If you don't talk to them about it, they're going to talk to somebody else. And you don't want that to happen. You want to be there. This is a joint learning opportunity. And they are also watching how you stand up or don't stand up to it and how you do it. You don't have to blow up Christmas necessarily, but for you to ignore something, for me, means complacency.
Right.
Fine with it. Like people back when they said, well, I'm not a racist, but segregation is okay because that's just, it keeps everything under control.
Right. No, you're a racist. And it's also, by being quiet, you're teaching children that it's okay at a certain level.
Right.
And also, just one more thing with TV, another way you can really be anti-racist is, and my kids hate me for it, but guess what? They think about it. I watch those stupid shows with my kids, and I point out every implicit bias, every racist move. I ruin those shows for them. Like Victorious, right? The Disney show. The one Black character they have is a young man. He's oversexed. He's chasing girls. all of that. The two Black women they have on the show are both emotionally unstable, irrational, loud, and not very smart. That's the only representation of Black people they have on the show. And then if they have anybody of person of color, it's usually as a gang member, they get in something. And so I point that out. And then also the female part is that she gets into this school and she gets into this place, but it's because she's discovered. It's not because she goes after it, because women aren't supposed to be ambitious and chase after their dreams. It's much more acceptable if we sing and someone goes, oh wow, you're really great. No, I'm not. Oh no, you're going to be in the show. No, I can't. No, you need to be. And in that piece, but why is it okay for the man to go after their goal? So just that, I blew up Peter Pan, I blew up Hannah Montana, Victorious. I let my kids watch it and I sit there with them and I blow it up. Friends. Oh yeah, we can watch Friends, but we don't get to stop until a Black person shows up eight episodes later. They're like, okay, Mom, we love this show. I said, oh, but did you see all the homophobic things going on? Yes, Mom, we caught those. You taught us well. There's no Black people on the show. Right. And I do that and I'll ruin every show.
Well,
and they hate me for it.
That's
but
the
now
only way. Go ahead,
they
sorry.
can see it. I mean,
Well,
like now they point it out themselves.
Well, the only way that change happens, unfortunately. I mean, you try and do it nicely, you try and do it quiet, but it's like, I'm going back to the 60s again, but until the people got out in the streets, got on the Freedom Riders, got on the bus, they had sit-ins, it went worldwide with images of, Black people and white people being hosed down by the cops and dogs being sicked on them. That's when people went, oh, we have a problem here. Maybe we should do something. When up until that point, people have been saying that. Last thought, based on what you just said about the kids too, is I'm going to bring up Aunt Jemima again, because if you grow up and all you ever see of a particular race is one stereotypical image, which is based on reality. It's not like there aren't heavy-set, smiling Black women around, but if that's all you see, and then you see ads where the person is going this and that and yo and all this other stuff, bad English, that's all you grew up with. It's kind of like if I grew up and the only show I ever watched about white people were the Beverly Hillbillies. And I thought, oh, all white people are like that, like the Beverly Hillbillies. Well,
and there are people like that.
And they are. But of course, I saw the whole spectrum of the white race growing up. So I knew there were doctors, I knew there were cops, I knew there were lawyers, I knew there were the Beverly Hillbillies, they were all there. But growing up, that's why Sidney Poitier was such a big thing for Black people. So in the 60s, it's like, oh, a Black man who's got a good job, who's intelligent. We hadn't seen that really up until that point, really. So that's why I'd say when people are so upset, oh, they're upgrading Aunt Jemima. Why are people so upset? It's just a pancake, a mix. It's not just a pancake mix. It was used as a weapon to reinforce racial stereotypes, just like a lot of other images. And if we had, like I said earlier, before we started this, I said, if they had, Aunt Jemima look like Angela Davis with a big afro and her fist up in the air and said, try my pancakes, would they have been fine with that? I don't think so.
No.
They want the happy, smiling, docile image.
Well, it's also Aunt Jemima is the part of Black history that was expected to care for white children, white women in particular. So it's okay if you have a Black person representing something, as long as it's around taking care of the white family.
And not threatening.
Yeah. And it's insidious. It's insidious. So, and this is, and I know we're going to have some more time because I really want to dive into you with how this has impacted my ex-husband who's Black, and how even though I was married to him and this person just diversity, equity, and how I failed him. Go into that later. When I went to a march, a gentleman got up and he said, just find your lane. He said, if you're going to push changes in the boardroom, I don't need you out in these streets, right?
Mm.
If you're going to push policy behind closed doors, you don't have to be the one making the videos and the blogs or writing the articles. Like, find your lane that you're going to stay in for the rest of your life and continue to push that way. As long as we're all going the same direction, we don't have to be in the same lane. I mean, like, it's counterproductive for all of us to be in the same lane. The
That's a
traffic
good point.
doesn't flow that way.
Mhm.
So that's, I'm just like, find your lane. And right now, for white people, if it's sitting and learning and listening, like the active listening, and that's what you're doing right now, that's your lane. That's fine.
Good.
And then practice your arguments on Facebook with family members or dumb people.
Like that.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Well, thank you very much.
you